our hands, we will be in control of something. We will change the system.
The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker. Rated E for everyone.
Get ready for eye-popping, jaw-dropping GameCube action with Mario Party 4.
Video games have a different meaning to each person. One can see video games as a form of entertainment, a casual and brief moment that can give a boost of serotonin and pleasure. Some can view video games as a safe space or a means of escapism. After a long day of work or school, all you want to do is unwind and pick up your favorite game and get lost in it. Feeling the comfort and joy it can bring in that moment is something that can't be unmatched. For many people throughout their lives, video games have always been there and have been through all the ups and downs that life can bring to a person. Video games have always been in my life. In my family, we've had our fair share of consoles and games to go along with them. We've had consoles from the Nintendo GameCube, Wii, and even the PS1 and PS2. There are many distinct memories of coming home from school and wanting to pick up a game where we had left off, only to be told by our parents that homework comes first and we can pick up the game afterwards. Or on the weekends where my brother and I would spend time racing down the streets in Sonic Adventure 2. Or the times we spent at our cousin's house playing on Nintendo 64 and duking it out in Mario Kart. Even though video games have always had a presence in my life, my relationship with video games were very casual. I never really had a super deep connection with video games. I enjoyed my time, but I never really was consistent or really bothered to keep up with playing or finishing games. Video games were always around thanks to my brother. In our house, video games were something to do with the family, but I never truly was invested in them like other kids were. However, my perspective on video games and how I felt about them were all changed in March of 2020. It wasn't until Miss Rona decided that we all were going to stay at home and quarantine. With no concrete date of when it was safe to return to our normal routines, we were stuck with our own devices to keep ourselves entertained and our sanities in check. At the time, I was a recent college graduate, and with my employment future looking kind of bleak, I had way too much time on my hands. I was getting bored of the same routine of watching the same movies, shows, and YouTube videos. And the books in my personal library were beginning to dwindle as I went through them at an alarmingly fast rate. So with the abnormal large amount of free time that I haven't had in years, I wanted to do something with my time. So I decided to buy a Switch Lite as a graduation gift. The games that I picked up were Undertale and Animal Crossing New Horizons. At this time, Animal Crossing New Horizons had just come out and I was familiar with the franchise, so I thought I would give it a shot. I was grasping for straws with the amount of boredom in my life and had nothing better to do, so I said, why not? If I didn't have fun playing them, I can give it to my brother to play, who would appreciate it more than me. But after spending time playing with these two games alone, it was like a spark that ignited in me. I realized that there is more to video games than I thought. From there, I bought more games and consoles, and I've completely dived into the world of gaming that I honestly never thought I would. With my newfound love for gaming in my 20s, I realized that there are more games that I missed or completely decided to skip out on that I wanted to try for myself. I had a very foolish and naive preconceived ideas of video games that didn't permit me to play them in my childhood. Finding this spark now has allowed me to enter a world of new stories and experiences that no other medium can convey or replicate. Like I mentioned before, video games have been in my life, but my relationship with it was very casual and very informal. So let's start at the beginning in my early childhood, where I was introduced to the imaginative world of gaming. My earliest memory of gaming is when my brother and I went over to my cousin's house and played on their Nintendo 64. At the time, it was a completely new experience since technology like this was still new to me and to our household. My family wasn't that financially well off at the time since my parents had immigrated to the country just a few years prior. It was truly an experience. Playing Mario Kart 64 and Super Mario 64 was revolutionary. As a 4 or 5-year-old kid who has never seen a console or video game before, you knew that I was left shook. To me, it was like an immersive cartoon that I got to be a part of, and as a kid, that is like a dream. I remember being bummed out when we had to go home, knowing that we wouldn't be playing these games until the next time we came back to their house for another visit. Both my brother and I had a very fond memories of hanging out with our cousins and playing those games. And I guess my parents noticed how much my brother and I had been enjoying playing them, more so my brother, and got the PlayStation 1 as a hand-me-down from a friend. Now, both my brother and I don't recall much about the PlayStation 1 that we had in the house because we honestly didn't play it much. But a console that we both do remember and were very quite fond of was the GameCube. I remember that the GameCube was out for a while and my brother had asked it for his birthday. The GameCube was a console that I remember playing on and had a lot of great memories with. We had games like Sonic Adventure 2, Super Mario Sunshine, Mario Kart Double Dash, Mario Party 4, and Spider-Man 2. Of these games, one that my young self could play was Sonic Adventure 2, just barely, as well as Mario Kart Double Dash as co-op with my brother and Mario Party 4. These games to me were peak gaming in my eyes. For my small adolescent brain, I could comprehend them enough to play them, but was still pretty trash and asked my brother for help and guidance. With the GameCube, I also realized that I enjoyed just watching my brother play these games that were too difficult for me to play on my own. To me, it felt like I was watching a Saturday morning cartoon with a lot of backseat gaming on my end. This became a common pastime of mine, especially when we got the PlayStation 2. Now, with the PlayStation 2, I clearly remember not playing much on this console, but just watching my brother play on it was just as fun and entertaining. The games in our catalog at the time were the Sly Cooper series, Ratchet and Clank, Jak 2 and 3, as well as Marvel Alliance, to name a few. To me, just by looking at them, I knew that these games were too difficult, mechanic-wise, to play, but I was truly invested in the story when I watched my brother play. I think this was an era when I realized how fleshed out and intriguing the storyline in video games could be. It wasn't just about jumping to this platform or collecting all the coins or clues, but there was a real depth in these stories that these video games were telling. Watching Sly and his gang jet from country to country trying to fight gang leaders while also learning about Sly's family lineage was amazing storytelling at the time. Or following Ratchet and Clank's crazy adventures through space, time, and galaxies was such a crazy and wild ride. It was games like these that made me realize that you can show a story that TV shows or movies couldn't do. With this medium, you have the ability to really flesh out characters, storylines, world building that others couldn't do. However, as much as I loved watching my brother play, eventually I also wanted to be part of the fun, and that is when handheld gaming came into my life. I remember going over to my friend's house and she had showed me the Nintendo DS she had just got, and I instantly knew I had to have one of my own. We were playing Nintendogs and seeing how interactive it was with the touchscreen as we pet the dogs and using the microphone features to call out to the puppies. I knew I had to get one. The Nintendo DS line of handhelds were truly a force at the time. No one was coming out with such an innovative take on handheld gaming. I do remember the Game Boy line of handhelds, and specifically wanting the Game Boy Micro. Shout out to the Game Boy Micros. I know nobody really cared about them and thought they were a gimmick, but I always thought they were really cool. Either way, for Christmas that year, I asked for a pink DS Lite, and that thing was my baby. I only had 2 games on it, Nintendogs, which I still have and play on from time to time, as well as Super Mario Bros. New, which was the first game that I remember completing on my own. Side story, I had the pink DS Lite, but I lost it outside when I was playing with a few kids in our apartment complex. I remember being so devastated, and my parents were definitely not happy with me. I remember begging them to replace the DS and that I will be more careful with it, and much to my surprise, they did replace it with a black DS Lite. I'm honestly surprised that my parents trusted me enough and got me another one. They probably just got tired of me constantly begging for it, and I probably just worn them down, but I was grateful nonetheless. Either way, having games on the DS Lite taught me that there are games that even I can play and thoroughly enjoy. I wasn't really overwhelmed by hard mechanics because at the time, the games that I played were easy to follow and that even a small child like myself could play were so much fun. Having a gaming console that was portable like the DS made it a more personal and intimate experience that I cherished. The DS Lite was not the only Nintendo console that would take over my time in entertainment. That other console was none other than the Wii. Now, this was a console that everyone and their grandmas, literally every grandma, had in their household. When the Wii first came out and introduced something new and innovative to gaming at the time, I remember on Christmas Day, both my brother and I spent hours playing Wii Sports. I remember the next day our arms were so sore as if we had just done an intense workout session the previous day. Other games that I remember fondly were Wii Play and its mini games, the Wii Footboard and getting quite serious in the dojo, or Mario Kart and being horrendous at it, and of course Super Smash Bros. Brawl and picking Kirby every time because he was the only player that I knew its playstyle enough to not to get completely obliterated by my brother. And certainly not least was Super Mario Galaxy Duology. Those were games at the time I thought were the most beautiful and cutting-edge gameplay I've ever seen. This was such a new experience for Mario, and how the incorporation of the Wii remote mechanics and multiplayer made it my favorite Mario experience till this day. Some honorable mentions and shout out to our very slow desktop computer we had in our house. The only PC gaming I remember were Cyber Chase, Math Busters, or some sort of flash gaming I played back then. But one game that holds a very special place in my heart and I remember playing was Bratz Rock Angels. I played through it in its entirety too many times to count. In my childhood, I played video games quite often and have a lot of memories that I cherish, but somewhere in my teens, I lost that childlike wonder for gaming, and all the consoles that we had in the house were either sold off, given away to friends, or collecting dust in our house, only to be touched for a short 30-minute session. As I grew into my awkward and weird teenage years, I put video games to the side and put boy bands and YouTube as my main source of entertainment. The only games that I played at the time were apps on my iPod Touch. Games like Temple Run, Angry Birds, or the very short-lived Flappy Birds. You will be missed. I remember when mobile gaming became a huge thing since smartphones were becoming more common. Games like Pokemon Go were trending, and getting my lazy butt outside and Pokemon Go into the bowls. I hope you guys remember that joke. At this time in my life, I kind of fell into the belief that gaming was for boys and that I would be too crap at it. Of course, that way of thinking is so old and outdated, but I felt that video games weren't really advertised or catered to girls, and there weren't any girls around me that were playing games or interested, so I kind of forgot about gaming until my 20s. In my 20s, I was honestly too occupied with college, work, and going out. My hobbies were honestly limited to a few things: going out with friends, YouTube, books, anime, etc. Around 2018, I was browsing through Crunchyroll and came across a new anime that had just come out called Persona 5 The Animation. I chose to watch the first episode and was thoroughly invested into where the story would lead next. I did more research and found out that it was based on a video game that had come out the year prior. So I decided to see if I could find any gameplay of this game and found an entire walkthrough of the game on YouTube. I originally wanted to watch where the episode ended, but I was so enthralled by the game and spent weeks watching the entire walkthrough as if it were a TV show I was binging. Persona 5 was a game that I never experienced before. I don't need to talk too much about this game since it's a very highly rated game that many people love, but a brief synopsis of it. It follows a group of high school students who create a vigilante group to expose the crimes of corrupt adults, but soon find themselves in the midst of a worldwide conspiracy and targeted by powerful individuals who would do anything to silence them. A boy robbed of his future must fight to clear his name. This was the very first JRPG that I experienced, and I was completely hooked. Everything about this game was truly amazing. The characters and getting to know them throughout the game and how fleshed out they were was incredible. By the end of the game, you get to see how your bonds with these characters pay off, and you generally fall for each and every one of them. Or at least some. After watching the entire walkthrough of the game, I honestly felt empty inside and wanted more. I was so into this game that I decided to go back and watch playthroughs of both 3 and 4 and love them just as much. But for some reason, my initial spark and joy for those games was short-lived, and I went back to my old hobbies and kind of forgot about those games altogether. I never really went deep into knowing more about the games like this in this genre. I even thought playing games like Persona was way too out of my league and way too difficult for me to grasp. It wasn't until 2020 when we were all forced to stay in our homes in quarantine when things began to change. At the beginning of the pandemic, I had just moved back in with my parents. I was in the middle of my last semester of college, and my on-campus job was trying to figure out what we can do remotely. So in between classes and work, I had way more free time than I was used to. During this time, when I was browsing through social media and YouTube, I noticed that this game kept popping up. This game was Animal Crossing New Horizons. Many of my friends and people that I follow were playing this game and creating their own islands and making friends with their villagers. Seeing this everywhere online and watching others play this game gave me major FOMO. Watching others interact with their friends and having loved ones visit their islands was something I wanted to be a part of. I decided to bite the bullet and purchase a Switch Lite. I ordered one from Walmart in gray, and after a long week of waiting, it finally arrived. I was excited to jump in and play and immerse myself into the game and create a new home on this deserted island. And boy, did this game live up to the hype. Animal Crossing New Horizons came at a perfect time, with the lack of human interaction and sense of community being taken away from us. This game was there to help through all that. I remember visiting a friend's island who I had not seen in months was something that I missed, that human interaction. This game was just the tip of the iceberg, and now that I spent money on the console, I wanted to get my money's worth. Since I had a new console and needed more games to play on it, so I decided to do my research when looking for new games for the Switch. I remember my time binge watching Persona playthroughs and the fun I had watching them. I knew that I couldn't play those games on the console, so I looked for games that were similar in genre. I knew that I wanted to play games that were story-based, and I found out that JRPGs were right up my alley. So the games that I ended up buying were Undertale, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, Ni no Kuni, and Fire Emblem Three Houses. Fire Emblem was the first one that I played, as well as the first JRPG that I played. This game is very similar to the Persona franchise in the sense where you have many characters to interact with and make bonds while fighting for a common goal. I love spending time teaching my students, strengthening my bonds, and growing with them in battle. I spent so many hours immersed into the world, and after finishing the Golden Deer route, it further cemented my love for the JRPG genre. After playing a few games on the Switch, I fell in love with the storytelling and complete immersion that video games had to offer. I wanted more, and I played games from the other consoles and handhelds. I fell into the rabbit hole and bought more games. I got a Nintendo 2DS XL, a Nintendo DSi XL, a Nintendo 3DS XL that was modded with games. Also bought a PS Vita to finally play Persona 4 Golden, and a PS4, and later upgraded to a PS5 to play more JRPGs. I was hooked. Even though my wallet wasn't happy, I was happy to be introduced and stumble upon new games to play. Gaming and video games have brought to me a happiness and joy that no other medium has made me feel. Honestly, if it weren't for the panorama, I'm not sure if I would have indulged in the idea of playing video games and picking it up as a legitimate hobby. This new resurgence and love for the hobby has been truly amazing, and I can't wait to see what journeys, stories, and characters await me. I still have so many games I want to play, and I have a lot of catching up to do, but I'm here for the ride.